We have breaking news right now. Our Elise Labott just finished an interview with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and they talked about Libya. Elise joins me. She's on the phone from Lima, Peru.
Cuts.
Well, Aaron, this is really, she gave a set of interviews to network reporters, really the first time speaking in depth about the attack on the U.S. post in Benghazi, where Ambassador Stevens and those 3 other Americans were killed. And, you know, she said the buck stops with her. You know, there has been a lot over the last couple of days and weeks about who takes responsibility. You heard Vice President Biden in the debate say, hey, we didn't know. And when I asked Secretary Clinton whether, you know, the White House was throwing the State Department under the bus, she said, listen, this is my State Department. I take responsibility. Security for the U.S. diplomatic post is a State Department function, and the Vice President and the President didn't know. Kind of distancing, I think, the State Department from the White House in this election season. Aaron, she also said that, you know, she didn't want to play any kind of blame game or political gotcha. She understands that the election is coming up, and obviously everyone wants to politicize this. But she said that 4 Americans died, need to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and need to make sure that the U.S. is still engaged diplomatically. And so she wants to wait for an investigation before she talks about whether there was good intelligence or bad intelligence or security decisions. But she did say, Aaron, the buck stops with her.
All right, the buck stops with her. And Elise, I guess the question would be, some people will say, look, is she sort of falling on the sword? I mean, the White House has made it very clear it was intelligence. It was the State Department. I mean, she's obviously being consistent with that from everything you heard her say.
I don't think so. I think that it's true. You know, obviously that the White House would know about threats in Benghazi, but those individual security decisions are really a State Department of function, and that's basically what she was saying. The responsibility for protecting the embassies does lie with her, but also she said, yeah, we need to work with Congress to make sure that we're getting the appropriate funding. We need to, the whole U.S. government has to work together to make sure that diplomats are getting what they need. You know, Aaron, everyone talks about how the military need to have more resources for the troops, but we've seen a lot of budget cuts over the last couple of years for State Department funding. And so I think she's saying, listen, we'll see where the intelligence comes out and what happened that night. But I don't think she's trying to throw the White House under the bus, kind of like the White House was last week for the State Department.
All right. Well, thanks very much to Elise Labott. You just heard it here first. Elise Labott reporting. She talked to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who said the buck stops with her. We asked that question on Friday. Where does it stop? The State Department or the White House? Well, the Secretary of State, at least tonight, trying to make the argument that it should stop with her and go no further. Our fourth story out front is Libya. It has been almost 5 weeks since the attacks. And in addition to a dramatically changing U.S. government story about what happened, those responsible are still at large. Senator Bob Corker just returned from a fact-finding trip to Libya and has been demanding answers from day one. Right before the show, I asked him what he actually learned.
Well, the country is very fragile. I mean, they are, I think the country is basically governed security-wise through militias. And so right now they have a lot of security issues. That's one of the reasons that there's such difficulty in trying to prosecute the folks responsible for this. But both with the president of the GNC, the military, the prosecutor general, and the foreign minister, we pressed, obviously, the case that we wanted full cooperation in finding them. And I think they have the will. It's just that the country, as most people know, has almost no institutions of government.
And what about your visit with U.S. intelligence on the ground in Libya? What did you find out? I know you have a lot of questions about, did they have the help they need? Were they turned down for security requests? What did you hear?
I focused mostly on that evening, and there's not a shadow of doubt, Aaron, that the administration knew that this was a terrorist attack. I think they knew it in real time, but certainly within 24 hours. At the highest levels of our government, they were very aware that this was a terrorist act, and that's why this whole response over the last 5 weeks has been so bizarre. I mean, there was no question about it. For 5 days later, to have the kind of interviews, for the classified briefings that we've had to be the kind that they are, it just begs the question, towards what end is the administration were they trying to paint a different picture? I know by now, obviously, they've been flushed out and obviously have a very different view of what happened, but it's just hard to imagine what the point was of misleading the American people in that way.
Right. I mean, about several things, about the role of the movie, about whether there were protests, about whether it was a terrorist attack and who was responsible. There's something that, of course, has also happened, which is that the White House, Joe Biden said it at the vice presidential debate, and now David Axelrod has said it, that the president and the vice president were not aware of additional security requests, and that only the State Department was aware and makes those decisions. Let me just play David Axelrod yesterday making this point, because I think it's important the way he said it.
These requests go into the security professionals at the State Department, and there's no doubt that some of these matters went into the Security Department at the State Security Agency at the State Department, but it didn't come to the White House, and that's what the Vice President was responding to.
Now, I'm just curious, Senator, what your view is on this. I mean, it's all one administration, right? So is it fair for the White House to point the finger over at the State Department, or as they did to me on the phone recently, say any error with these briefing points was the responsibility of the intelligence community, not theirs?
So I can understand how the security request might not have been known at the White House. I understand that. What is not acceptable is what the vice president said in the debate, is that for, a long period of time they were unsure of what happened. I'm absolutely convinced, Aaron, again, beyond a shadow of a doubt, by meeting with people in Libya on the ground, that at the highest levels of our government, they knew it was a terrorist act on the front end. And my sense is that in this political season, what they're trying to do is to make Americans feel like they have vanquished terrorism, and any act like this obviously shows very different. I think and most people who are paying attention to this understand that the Arab Spring has ushered in a whole new era of terrorism. And what we're finding is there are vacuums that have been created in places like Libya, but also in Egypt, and as we move out of Afghanistan and certainly in Syria, where terrorism is actually growing in these countries. And my sense is that's what this has been all about, is in this presidential race, the White House not really wanting people to focus on the fact that that's the case.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Senator. Always good to talk to you, and appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, and we're going to be talking to Senator Corker to get his reaction to the fact that the Secretary of State now, in an interview to CNN, says that she takes responsibility for the failures in Benghazi, and it is not the fault of the White House.